It is 7 o'clock, so I want to get started so we can allow plenty of time for the presentation and Q&A. I want to welcome everyone to tonight's xMinds event. I'm Melanie Carlos, Executive Director of xMinds, or Partnership for Extraordinary Minds. In a minute, we'll get to Francis Shefter's presentation, Empowering Parents, How to Prepare for a Successful IEP Meeting. But before we dive in, I just want to go over a few quick notes. First, I want to point out that this meeting is being recorded and will be made available on the xMinds YouTube channel. We're also offering simultaneous translation for the Spanish speakers in the audience. Our social media coordinator, Ana Juarez, will explain how to access the Spanish audio channel. Ana.
Hola, buenas tardes. Gracias por estar con nosotros para acceder este evento en español. Busque abajo en el icono de interpretación, es un icono de globo, abajo en la pantalla de Zoom. Haga clic ahí y luego escoja escuchar en español y eso lo va a llevar a donde estamos dando la transcripción en español. Gracias.
Thank you, Ana. For those of you who are new to our events, I want to introduce ourselves. We are xMinds, a parent-led autism nonprofit. We collaborate with families, educators, and providers to enhance educational outcomes for autistic students in Montgomery County, Maryland. At xMinds, we're all about connection and support. From this monthly speaker series to 4 unique parent discussion groups, we're here to help families navigate special education. For those with younger children, we also host in-person gym meetups and offer a variety of other resources and services, all free of charge. You can explore everything we offer on our website at xminds.org, and don't forget to check the chat. Daniel Timms, our program assistant, will be sharing helpful links and information there throughout the session. I am happy to welcome back Francis Shefter to xMinds. Some of you may have heard her speak in person at our IEP clinic in November. She was so helpful answering a multitude of questions from our audience, so we decided to ask her to come back in this virtual setting. Francis brings so much experience and knowledge about IEPs. Her firm, Shefter Law, is committed to having her clients have a stress-free IEP experience. Before becoming a lawyer, Francis was a teacher and school administrator, specializing in special education. This gives her experience on both sides of the IEP table. She is here today to teach us how to prepare for a successful IEP. And as usual, we'll leave plenty of time for Q&A. Welcome, Francis Shefter.
Thank you, Melanie, sorry, there we go. Are we up? We're good, right? Everybody sees the screen? Okay, so empowering parents, how to prepare for a successful IEP meeting. I'm Francis Shefter with Shefter Law PA. A little bit about me. So I have my undergrad in early childhood. I taught in regular education for a few years. I went back and got my master's in special education and spent a few more years in the classroom. And then I was a special ed coordinator, which is an administrative teaching position. I realized I wasn't making the difference I wanted to make for children. And so I decided to go to law school. And of course, after law school, made the most sense for me to become an education attorney because I had the experience with the education. I have 2 children. Both of them are neurodiverse. One is on the spectrum. So that's a little bit about me. Now to jump in, what should you know? What do you need to know on the IEP meetings? You're entitled to meaningful participation. That means you are an equal member of the team. Your opinion counts, your knowledge counts, the data you have counts. And you also need to be sent the information beforehand so that you can fully prepare and meaningfully participate. Ask questions. If you don't know, don't get intimidated I know, I get it. There's 8 people on the other side of the IEP meeting and they're talking away with the special education terminology. If you don't understand something, stop them and ask the question. Because if you don't understand, you might be agreeing to something that might not be appropriate for your child. Ask for data. Data supports everything for your present levels and your progress. You want to see the data. How do you say that he's progressing? How do you know that he's learned this? What's the data say? What are you looking at? And this isn't simply just your MAP scores or just, one assessment. Their data has to be several points. And the data you have is just as important as the data that they have. So collecting your own data, and you might ask how you do that, but you keep a calendar of if they're sending your child home, just keep a calendar, called at 12 o'clock and sent him home, called at 1 o'clock and said that he was having a hard day, but I didn't bring him home. And just have that data to show that, hey, you guys aren't doing what you're supposed to be doing. What you should have with you, your draft IEP. If you're at an IEP meeting, they should be sending you your draft 5 days in advance. And this is Maryland requires 5 days in advance or reasonable. So any documents that they send in advance, the draft IEP, your own data, and a list of questions if you have any questions. So that you don't have to try to remember everything, take specific good notes. I do it directly onto the IEP, and then you have your specific notes. Sometimes what I will do, and what I did for my daughter's IEP, is they sent me the 5 days. I marked up the IEP, sent it back to the special education coordinator. So at the IEP meeting, it went a lot quicker because she knew where we were. And then she said, well, we agree with this or not with this, and then went on. So sometimes it's helpful if you send it in advance to them as well. But having those advanced documents is all that you have to be able to meaningfully participate. Because if you don't know what they're talking about, you can't be an equal participant. For eligibility, the things that are important on eligibility is the evaluations. You can have evaluations done privately or by the school, but both of those evaluations are important, and each have their different roles. You bring the evaluations in determining eligibility. One of the things that the schools like to say about is the high grades and on or above grade level. There's no educational impact. It's getting high grades. She's above grade level. What are you talking about? There's no educational impact. We agree the child has autism, but there's no educational impact. Here's the thing, not available for learning. That's an educational impact. If you have a child that's out of the room 50% of the day, 25% of the day, even 10% of the day, they're not available for learning, and that's the educational impact. So it doesn't matter that they're getting good grades or they're making progress on their IEP. If they're not in the classroom available for learning, that's an educational impact. One of the questions was moving from a 504 plan. So 504 plan and IEPs are different, somewhat the same to qualify that you have a disability and there's an educational impact. The difference is that for an IEP, there needs to be specialized instruction. What are the goals going to be? What goals does your child need to work on? That's where I've gotten a lot with our kids on the spectrum, especially with the PDA profile. They're like, but they're educationally fine. What goals? Academically, there are no goals. That's where your executive functioning goals come in, or attendance goals, working on like what's the behavior behind the attendance and how can we do that, and coping strategies. So if you can articulate goals, that's when you can switch to the IEP and you're able to convince the school of the need. So there's technically 8 parts of the IEP, but these are the main levels, the present levels. If the school doesn't have good present levels of who your child is, the rest of the IEP cannot be done accurately. I always say the stranger test. Does the present levels truly paint a picture of who your child is in that area? So in reading, listing out a bunch of MAP scores is not helping you. Listing that the child knows the ABCs is not helping. We need a full picture of what the child's able to do with what supports or without supports, because that's also important. How they're performing and with what supports. And once you have good, solid present levels, you go on to your accommodations. And those are your extra time, preferential seating. These are the things that are usually in the testing, and they're in the drop-down menu. When you have the accommodations, make sure on the bottom that they're justifying it and why they're justifying it, or if any explanation is needed. Next, you go on to your supplementary aids and services. These are the other things that are happening in the classroom that your child needs to be successful. And we'll go into more details in these a little bit later, but the important thing on supplementary aids and services is the clarify location and manner. Okay, clarify location and manner. Across all settings isn't clarifying the location and manner. This should be just as specific and individualized as your goals. What does it look like? Preferential seating. Well, guess what? Some kids, the preferential seating is near the door because they need to be able to get up and walk out. Some kids, it needs to be away from the door because they elope. What does preferential seating look like for your child? And how is that going to be implemented in the classroom? That's what needs to be put in that for every single section. Positive praise. What does that mean? Is your child one that needs a thumbs up? Is your child one that needs a pat on the shoulder? Or does your child need a sticker? What is positive praise work? All of our kids are different and all of the needs are different. Goals, SMART goals, making sure that they align with your present levels. And this is where present levels are so important, is that if you don't have good present levels, you don't know if your goals are appropriate. So your present levels should paint the picture of your child's strengths and weaknesses, and your goals should be focused on the weaknesses of your child. What does your child need to help develop to catch up or to get to where your child needs to be after high school or, to middle school or wherever the next step is? And then you have your services. These are, your related services, your speech, occupational therapy, physical therapy. For kids that are not in are they in a self-contained classroom all day? Are they going to be with gen ed kids for lunch and recess? Are they going to be in self-contained just for reading, math, science, and social studies, your core subjects? What does it look like? Those are where the services are. Also is it going to be push-in services, meaning in the general education, or pull-out services, meaning that the teacher's going to come and pull your child out? And make it specific in there, because a lot of times they say that it's the general education teacher, that it's the general education, sorry, I'm just making sure I'm not muted. Okay, that it's the general education teacher that's going to implement the services. Well, how's the general education teacher going to implement? What does this look like? And how is that happening? And then transition services. Transition services usually start the year your child turns 14. And these are the services of what is the school going to do to help your child transition once they graduate or complete their certificate of completion. What do they need? Looking at college, looking at vocational schools, independent living, not independent living. What skills does your child need for this transition? Sorry. So accommodations, general accommodations that we know, extra time, small groups, frequent breaks, speech to text. These are ones that are often what we need with our children. Alternative location, I get that a lot, but alternative location is usually not necessarily what our children need, because small group covers that. Alternative location must be on the first floor. So a child that is in a wheelchair must be on the first floor. It needs to be a specific location for the need. Small group is usually the appropriate accommodation. Accommodations for our nonverbal babies. Not, non-speaking, nonverbal, they're all communicating. So I don't like not communicating. Everything is a communication from our children, even with behaviors. A visual schedule, so that they can move, even sometimes you'll do a visual schedule that there's a Velcro that you move the little, the picture of your child down to where we are in the schedule, so they know where we are, where we've been, and where we're going. Simplifying instructions, making sure that they're understanding the instructions. And remember, it's not making them so easy that your child is like, whatever, I know this, but simplifying them in the way that they can understand. Alternative ways to respond is extremely important. Are they going to be able to respond verbally or with their AAC device? Are they going to be able to respond with a gesture? What is it? How are they going to be able to respond? Pointing at a picture, are you going to give them a choice? these are things that can go in the accommodations. And then alternate assessment options. If, the assessment is supposed to be doing a speech out loud, maybe your child can write a speech or something of that sort. Or if that's even too high, like how are we assessing them? Because just assessing them on verbal output isn't going to be appropriate, because our child, we don't know what's going on if there's only forced by verbal, because if they can't get it out verbally, there's information that could be back there in their head that we don't know about. So we need to figure out other ways to figure out where our kids are and how they can demonstrate mastery. For PDA, our autistic children with PDA, pervasive demand avoidance or persistent drive for autonomy, preferential seating. What I usually do for my PDAers is I put the child and teacher at the beginning of each quarter will determine the preferential seat and the alternative seat, so that our PDAer has that choice of where they are. Answers in the textbook. It makes it easier not having, although these days I think everything's computerized, so I don't think they're using the old Scantron, just to age myself a little bit. But being able to write the answer in the test book and not having to transfer it to an answer sheet is helpful. Also, only one exam a day. A lot of times with our PDAers, that's all they can handle. It gets too overwhelming if they have to study for 2 subjects. So I've definitely gotten that on the IEPs of 1 exam a day. And I'm trying to slow down for the interpreter, but I'm also trying to go fast because we have a lot of information to go through. Supplementary aids, our sensory diet for our kids that have the sensory needs. And again, this needs to be specific. What does that look like for your child? Is your child one that needs to push heavy objects? Is your child one that needs to hug something or feel hugged? Is your child one that needs to jump and needs to have access to a trampoline? What is it that your child needs for the sensory input? And also, how is it going to be scheduled? Some kids, it's as needed, but some kids, you realize if they don't have 5 minutes to jump every hour, they're not going to learn. They're not going to progress. Something's going to happen that's going to dysregulate them. So that's how it's built. A visual schedule. Again, putting specifics. Is that visual schedule the one up on the board for the whole class? Or do they have a visual schedule on their desk or in their notebook? Where is it and what does that look like? Again, with our preferential seating goes here, and you can go into, it is in the accommodations and the supplementary aids in MCPS. Again, go into your details of how you want the preferential seating. Social stories and social skills groups. Those are so important to be able to help our children with their social aspects. Way back when, it used to be social isn't, pragmatic isn't a school issue. That's a home issue. We don't address that. But thankfully now the schools realize that the social is an important part of school, because if they're not feeling part of the group and able to communicate and socialize with their peers, then they're not truly there available for learning, because they're stressed or having anxiety or whatever it is in the background. So making sure that there's social stories and social skills groups and what that looks like. Is it a lunch bunch? Is that okay? Is it that, your child gets to go with the safe person for lunch with 2 preferred friends, and then they talk and have that dialogue? What specifically does it look like? For our little ones that are nonverbal, alternative work submission. Again, like how do they best communicate, and what's the way to get that, get what they know out to the teacher? Another one is staff training. This is one that people don't realize. MCPS puts it in different places. It depends on the school, but you can 100% get staff training. They need to be trained on the AAC device. They need to be trained on how to interact with your child, how to communicate with your child. This is, IDEA says for the child or for the benefit of the child. Well, obviously staff training is for the benefit of the child, because if you have an aide that doesn't know how to use the AAC device, how is your child going to be able to communicate? Critical staffing, one-on-one. MCPS bounces around all the time with what it is with the critical staffing. You need to have your argument strengths of why the critical staffing is important. I've gotten it put on for the AAC device. The child's still learning how to use the AAC device. And if he doesn't have somebody with them the entire day, the child's not communicating. And that's not acceptable. So we need to have a one-on-one with that child to help the child interact with the AAC device. And of course, that critical staffing one-on-one needs to be trained on the AAC device. Or if your child is an eloper, do you need one-on-one or do you need just additional support? What works for your child? Sometimes as our kids get older, one-on-one isn't as appropriate or doesn't work as well because the kids get embarrassed because they know the one-on-one is there. So sometimes we fade that critical staffing out to an additional adult support. So there's an adult in the classroom that's keeping the eye on, but they're not sitting right there one-on-one with your child. And again, that gets spelt out in your supplementary aids. And then regular communication with caregivers and your outside providers. That is so important, is to have that connection. Because if the school is teaching one thing and your outside providers are teaching another, you're just confusing your child. So if the two talk and they all talk and they're on the same page, you get that consistency for our children that they so desperately need. So for an example, with my daughter, she comes to me one day, she's like, Mom, my PT is telling me to stand my ground and my therapist is telling me to walk away. What am I supposed to do? And so I realized they're both right in the different circumstances. So I was able to talk to the PT and her therapist of saying, hey, this is where she's confusing. Let's work with her to differentiate when you're supposed to walk away, when you're supposed to stand your ground, and what does that look like? So again, having that conversation, if your child is able to, or just your teacher or the speech pathologist and the outside providers, helps your child for the continuity. Supplementary aids for our PDAers, chewing gum. That is one my daughter chews on her hair or her clothing. Let's get chewing gum in there for her, that she's allowed to chew gum because that's what she needs. She needs that biting feeling is what comforts her and how she does it. Indirect declarative language. Do you want to do your math paperwork now or do you want to do your reading now? Give them that choice because as we all know, saying you need to do math now is the worst thing in the world. So giving that choice, or, hey, we've got a math assignment to do. Do you prefer doing it here or do you want to do it in the back of the room? You know, giving them the choice that they feel that they have some control. And that's also goes to the choices when possible. And a personalized safe space. Where is your child going to go when they get overwhelmed? What works for them? Is it a calm down corner in the classroom? Is it, my daughter likes tight little spaces. When she was younger, it was her locker. More recently, it's been the closet of the wellness room because the wellness room was too overwhelming. So what is this personalized safe space for your child and what does that look like? And the option to not participate. You know what? I just can't right now. And that's okay. They don't have to participate. They can sit in the back of the room. They can do what they need to do to regulate themselves, and it's okay to not participate. And again, our staff training. How do we interact with our PDA students? What's the best way to talk to them and what works and what doesn't work? Because sometimes if people don't know, they hear autism and they don't know PDA and they wind up making everything worse because they start, no, you have to do this now. And this is the schedule and you have to do that, which for kids on the spectrum might work, but for PDAers, it completely does not. Clarify location and manner, we went over a little bit. Individualize, specific, when and how. And this is, again, the stranger test. If I like to say at IEP meetings, if we all win the lottery tomorrow and say, peace out, we're moving to Jamaica, what is the next person? Are they going to be able to pick up this IEP and implement it? So they need to know specifically, what does the critical staffing look like? What does preferential seating look like? What does, positive reinforcement look like? They need to know specifically what you're doing. And a lot of times what I'll say at IEP meetings is, I know you're doing it, teacher. I know you are because you're a teacher and it's natural. Let's get what you're doing and put that on the IEP so that other people see it. Goals. What are some goals that we can look at? Conversational skills. Are they taking turns in conversation? Do they know how to start a conversation? How to continue a conversation on a non-preferred topic? Understanding social cues. That's so important for our kids on the spectrum. Like understanding when another child looks bored or an adult looks bored or annoyed, so that they know to move on and so forth. And sensory regulation. What are the goals for them to regulate themselves, through their sensory? What are their sensory needs and how are they going to regulate it? Let's work on goals, because our goal is for our child to self-regulate. That is most important. Obviously, they need our support now until they learn, but that's what we need to put in the goals, is what supports and how are we going to teach them to help regulate themselves. Goals for our nonverbal, self-regulation. Again, so important. How are they going to regulate themselves? When they get frustrated and they're hitting themselves because they're frustrated, let's teach them another skill. Like, you're frustrated, let's do this instead. Your functional communication. How, are they functioning in society? Like, it makes me crazy sometimes with some of the goals that they have. Like, let's be realistic. Is this functional communication? Is this communication this child is really going to use out in the real world? We're not learning in an isolated classroom. We need to be generalizing it outside in the regular. So what functional communication is for your child? Again, understanding and using facial expressions. How do we use them to understand? Like, let's show surprise, let's show anger. These are things like you can show the pictures and have the child practice it so that they understand and make that generalization. The same with understanding and using body language. Okay, I'm annoyed. Let's teach the child that. I'm so excited. Let's teach the child that, because that's what they need to be able to function in society. And again, we're not teaching our kids how to fit into society. We're trying to teach our kids how to function in society in their own way. And PDA goals, again, the social emotional skills, coping strategies, demand reduction, and anxiety management. And these are all areas that your goals can focus on. And that's where you go back to the eligibility and they're like, well, they're academically fine. What should the goals be? Boom. Anxiety management, demand reduction, coping strategies, and social emotional skills. And then all of a sudden the school's like, oh, I didn't know that was possible. And then you're looking at the goals that way. Next are our services. And so for services, counseling, social skills training, speech and language, is it push in or push out or pull out? The social skills training, again, is it in isolation, or is the counselor, the special ed teacher going to the playground once a week to help your child integrate with the other children, to have that social communication? Counseling, what does that look like for your child? Is counseling going to be that they come and you talk about strategies of handling anxiety, of how to regulate? Or could counseling just be that they come and they get to talk? Not necessarily a total direction, but how do they talk? Let them talk, let them have that downtime. And then your speech and language, yeah, it's great if your child learns how to produce the sounds in the setting with one or two other children and the speech pathologist. Can your child generalize that into the classroom? And that's where the push-in services come in and are so important. Because again, being able to do it in one little area isn't helpful. We need to be able to generalize it to the whole classroom and then generalize it in an unstructured setting like PE, or not PE, sorry, recess or lunch, where are the unstructured settings? And for our older kids, in between classes, how do we teach them how to communicate and how to have the speech? And that's where the services can be as needed. For our nonverbal behavior support, what is the behavior support they need when they're getting frustrated? Is it that they need support to have somebody with them to go for a walk, to walk around the classroom, to go for a walk, to go, look outside? What is it that they need to help with their behaviors? Alternative technology. In MCPS, you can always have, they call it a HIAT, HIAAT or ATT. I never remember what it stands for, but basically it's somebody from the assistive technology team comes out and observes your child. and can look at your child and see what's happening and be able to say, oh, this PECS communication system or this AAC device or this speech to text is what would work for your child. And they're able to give the teachers and staff pointers of what assistive technology is out there and available for them. Because the teachers and us, we don't know it all. That's specifically what the assistive technology team is trained to do, to know what technology is out there and what might work for your child and be better. And then again, our speech and language services. What does that look like? Do you want your child learning how to speak? Is learning how to speak not really something that you think your child's going to be able to do? Is sign language appropriate? Is the AAC device appropriate? What's appropriate for your child and what is that service going to look like? So again, it goes back to the goals, but your services, is it push in? Is it pull out? For our PDA kids, daily check-ins, just a, hey, how you doing today? Not a demand, although with some kids, how you doing today is a demand, but just a check-in, just saying hi can be the check-in, whatever works for your child. And again, that's how you write it in the IEP, the clarify location and manner. An extra resource period. I was able to get that built in for one child because she just needed that extra downtime. So yes, they have to give up an elective, but she needed the downtime, and it was so important, and it was so much more productive for her to have that extra resource period. Is that something that works? I have one student that was an aide in the counseling office. So as a PDAer, they're like, oh, I get to go help out in the counseling office is something that I want to do, where it's actually a service that we want for them because we know they're around the counselors and they're there and they're available, and they might talk, they might not talk, but it's just kind of, I don't want to say it's tricky, but it's just a way to help meet your child's needs and kind of meet them where they are. Placement. This is always the biggest one with all of our kids. What is the least restrictive environment? What does least restrictive environment mean? What's a continuum of services? So least restrictive environment, the way the law is written, is it starts with you're in your homeschool model. You're in your home-based school, in boundary school, in general education setting with supports and services in the classroom or pulled out. That's where we're starting. And then we're looking at, does your child need special education, smaller class size, more intensive teaching for your core classes? But electives and lunch and recess are okay with our general education peers. It's all about your child's needs, where they can reach their goals and progress towards their goals most successfully. And remember, it's not the Cadillac. Chevrolet is enough. We all want the best for our children, but the school system's only required to give them enough that they're making progress towards their goals. And that's the continuum of services. MCPS is pretty good about having their continuum services, but it switches up between elementary school and middle school, and then middle school and high school. So what that's going to look like is very different. So what you might have in the elementary school in a self-contained learning center might not be available in the middle school. So what does that look like? What does your child need? Not, well, we don't offer that, so your child's going to go into supported classes for the core. We don't offer general, special education. Well, if you don't offer it, and that's what your child needs, the intensive learning, because it's proven track record, throwing them in a class of 30 kids, even if there is an additional adult support, your child's not going to progress, is not going to be able to focus, then that's where you push them for, well, if you don't have it, then we need to look outside of MCPS. And that's where the CIEP process comes in. And if you have your team agreeing to a non-public placement, the school system can't, the schools on the school base can't say that. They can say, we can't implement the IEP here. We don't know of anything else. Now it needs to go to the central IEP team. At the central IEP team is when they talk about what it looks like, what non-public, is there something else in the MCPS? Usually not, because we've already had central office involved and we're looking at a non-public. So what can you do to prepare for your CIEP meeting? That's important. I always have my clients go and look at the options. What options are there? Go look at the non-public schools. Go look at the programs. See what is out there and what you think is appropriate for your child. I had one case, it was hysterical. My client went out and looked at, found the school they liked, got a conditional acceptance. We walk into the CIEP meeting. George Moore, who's the one that runs it in MCPS, I mean, he's been there forever. I think he's still running them for now. Says, okay, so, yeah, we see we need a non-public, some recommendations. I went, oh, sorry, Mr. Moore. We already have a conditional acceptance to such and such school. He's like, oh, okay. This was a Friday. The kid started the school on Monday because we already went through that whole process. So it cut that whole referral process out and shortened the time to get the child to a non-public placement. That doesn't always happen, but at least you can start the process. Some of the schools don't let you start the process because they say, well, not until you have funding from the school system, we won't do anything. But you can at least get an idea of what's happening at that school and whether you like that school for your child. Because look, with our kids, we say all the time, if you've met one autistic child, you've met one autistic child. I have some kids that are doing amazingly well in the learning center. I have some kids that are doing amazing in general education and some that need the non-public. So it all depends on your child and what your needs are and what your hopes are for your child and where you see them in the future. So all of those come into place when you're looking at placement. And it's important to know when we're talking about placement that if your child's not succeeding, the next step is a more restrictive environment. So if you want your child to stay in the home-based model because you want them having that general education, we need to get creative of how to get that IEP more appropriate and more supports there so that they don't push to the more restrictive environment. And that's why we usually start with, where do you want your child? In a non-public, in the homeschool model. Okay, now let's reverse engineer it and figure out how we can get your child there. What do you do if they say no? The schools love to say no. Require written notice. This is the document that they're required to send you after not only every meeting, after any discussion of services. The prior written notice is supposed to have what was requested, what was denied, why it was denied, and what is the data to support why it was denied. And so you requested an individual education evaluation paid for by MCPS. They have to, within a reasonable amount of time, respond to you with, okay, we authorize it, or no, we don't authorize it. Here's the PWN, and they might even file for due process against you. But again, they can't just say, nope, we're not doing it. If you asked for critical staffing and they say no, okay, I want the PWN, please. Please provide the PWN of why. If they're refusing to do it, you send an email. On this date, I spoke to you and requested XYZ. However, you said no and refused to issue a PWN. That's a procedural violation that if you file a state complaint, they're going to be found there's a violation. Ask them to see the policy. I love this one. This school's like, oh, well, it's our policy to not do that. Oh, really? Can you tell me the policy number? Because I like to read it all. So it's because I want to know the policy so that I understand what I'm looking at. I can guarantee 9 times out of 10, they don't know the policy. Same with show it to me in the federal law or in Maryland law, Comar. Really? IDEA says that? Which section? Can you point me to the right direction? Comar says that? Where is that? Those are also some buzzwords that you use that they're like, oh, wait, this parent knows what they're talking about. And it also sometimes alerts the teachers that they might not know what they're talking about. And just to let you know, like going back to my teaching days, I look back now and like, oh, that might not have been as legal as I thought it was. I wasn't doing anything to be obnoxious or mean or to hurt the child, but that's how I had been taught. I didn't know the law. I was a teacher. I hadn't gone to law school. I was told by my higher ups that you need to do X, Y, Z. So that's what I did. So sometimes it helps to get the teachers on board of like, oh, wait a minute, maybe that's not the way we're supposed to do it, and looking at other things. Because, teachers teach because they love what they do. We all know that. And so I never blame a teacher. They are doing the best they can with what they have and with what supports they have. So when we work together as a team, it's helpful and preserves that relationship. So going against for some buzzwords, not available for learning. That's what I said earlier. If your child is being sent home, if your child is going to the counseling office every day, if your child is sitting in the back of the room with headphones on, doesn't matter that they're getting straight A's. It doesn't matter that they're above grade level. They're not available for learning and not there. And it's their right. Free and appropriate public education is to be in the classroom learning and engaging. And so what do we need to do to help your child be able to learn in the environment? And then masking all day and dysregulated at home. This one drives me up a wall. I'm sure some of you have heard, we don't see that at school. That only happens at home. That's a home problem, not a school problem. Well, no. The problem is the child is holding it together all day because they want to be a people pleaser. They want to do the right thing. They know they're supposed to do A, B, and C, and they're masking their true feelings and they're trying to keep calm hands and not stim, even though that's what they need to be to help them regulate. And then they get home and everything falls apart. The argument is, if my child had the supports in the classroom that they needed, we wouldn't have this dysregulation at home. If they were able to stim how they need to stim, then that's what they need to do, and we wouldn't have the dysregulation at home, and they'll be more available for learning. And that goes back to jumping on a trampoline. Or I have one child that likes to listen to his music and spin. He's not going to do that in class. So to say, oh, the whole class is going to do a movement break doesn't work for him. He needs to know every afternoon he can go to this safe space and listen to his music and spin or color or do what he needs to do to self-regulate. Because having that one little thing put in place regulates him throughout the day. Him knowing that it's coming helps regulate him. Having it happen helps regulate him after the fact. And so those are the things. What do we need to help our kid regulate in the school so that they're not masking all day and falling apart at home? I kind of say I always try to make it like friendlier at the IEP meetings. I don't like to go in adversarial. They're just my team members. But I like to say, like, think about it. You're all day teaching. You can't do a lot of things that you want to do. You're holding it together. You are so annoyed and so ticked off, but you're holding it together all day. What do you do when you get home? Well, have a glass of wine, go for a run, watch a movie, watch something funny, go play a game with your kids, whatever it is to release. And so when you look at it that way, when our kids are holding it together all day and they come home, they don't have those outlets. They don't necessarily understand those ways to relieve that stress. And so they're falling apart and communicating the only way they know how to. And then what data do you have to support that? When the school says, oh, but they're making so much progress. We see such a difference. Oh, what data do you have to support that? Do you have the teacher observations? Do you have the autism checklists? Do you have your tally marks? Where did you collect data? When did you collect data? And where is it? IEPs say specifically how they're going to collect data going to the goals. Well, where's that data? A summary of that data? Okay, fine, but I want to see the actual data. I want to know precisely what you have to show that my child is making progress or not making progress. Communication, start of the school day, start of the school year. All right, let's be realistic. 37-page IEP, if you're lucky. Sometimes it's 45, sometimes it's 50 something. Long IEP. Teacher, general ed teacher or special ed teacher, they have more than one IEP. They have 8 to 10 IEPs usually on their calendar, on their schedule, whether it's self-contained with 8 kids or it's a gen ed classroom of 30, there's a chance that they have 8 IEPs. Are they going to truly read that entire IEP, digest it all, understand your child, and be able to implement it? Reality, no, it's not going to happen. They're going to know the basis. They're going to do the best they can, but they don't have the tools and the means necessary to actually remember it all and look at it all and get things going. So what I always recommend at the beginning of the school year, hey, here's my child. This is what my child, this is the picture of my child. This is what my child needs to be successful in school. These are the supports that are most important. So for me, at the beginning of the school year, I always, at open house, hey, where's my child's safe space? Have you identified it? Okay, great, we're good. Because I know if she has her safe space and knows where her little corner is, then at least she has that, and that will help. What's most important for your child? Hey, just to let you know, my child likes to run if he sees XYZ. So if you think you're going to be somewhere near that, please make sure you're holding my child's hand. Just give them the nutshell of what your child needs and how your child is going to function in the classroom. Do your periodic check-ins. Every 9 weeks, you're supposed to get the progress report of how your child is doing towards your goals and objectives. For kids in the autism class, you're supposed to get the autism grids. I know for a fact that a lot of my clients, autism grids, what are those? And their kids have been in the autism class for years. So it's important to know and to where your child is and to do the periodic check-ins. How's my kid doing? What's going on? There's been too many times that I've heard, well, in January, I was told that the entire year, my child has been doing XYZ. Or in December, I was told that my child is failing for the semester because of all the classwork that they missed. Wait a minute. Why did I not know this? Why didn't anybody tell me this? Again, teachers have a lot on their plates. Yes, they're supposed to. Does it happen? No. Being that parent, I remember when I was a teacher, I was like, oh, I'm never going to be that parent. Well, guess what? Yes, I am. I am that parent. I'm not obnoxious about it, but I'm going to do those check-ins because I want to make sure that my child is being successful in the best way that they can be successful. When issues arise, have that communication, have that open dialogue. Like, hey, I'm noticing that when my child's coming home, they're wet or their diaper's dirty or they seem more frustrated than normal. What's going on? Have you noticed anything? And it's not, so that's not in a way of attacking, what are you doing at school? But it's a way of, hey, what's going on? Let's see if we can figure it out. Because sometimes there might be a little tweak in the schedule that works, or there's something else that's happening or something happening on the bus. But when we have that open communication and talk about it when the issues arise, rather than wait for it to build up, then it's the better, more open communication. Remedies. What do we do when you are at that point of it's not happening? You're not meeting in the middle, you're not getting anywhere, it's just not going to happen. What are the first things is an administrative review that MCPS has? And I didn't pull up the link, but for an administrative review, there's a form that you do that says, this is what's happened at the IEP meeting. This is why I feel that it's incorrect. Can an outside administrator look at what happened and determine whether the IEP team was correct or whether something else needs to be done? And so that's like the first easiest, least expensive way to do the administrative review. Now, mind you, when I do my administrative review, I write it like a due process complaint. The same when I do my state complaint and mediation. Why? Because I want to make sure everything is there. And then if administrative review doesn't work, boom, my state complaint's pretty much done, or my due process complaint is already done because it's all there. I don't like playing the, oh, let's keep the rabbit under the table for now. I put it all out there. Like, hey, this is it. This is this child. This is where we think our child should be. This is where the school says we disagree. What do you think? Here's our evidence. There's their evidence. So the administrative review, and I think it's you have 20 days. Don't quote me because I don't totally remember, but it says it on there. I believe they have 20 days to respond to administrative review. So it's also the quickest way. The next is a state complaint. Hey, school procedural violation happened. The school is wrong. They didn't do XYZ. They should have. We need a remedy. Can you investigate it? There, the state goes in and they investigate. They have 60 days to issue their letter of findings. And that's whether there was a procedural violation or not, and what happened. They make their issues of finding of like, yes, a procedural violation occurred. This is what needs to happen. The school system needs to do X, Y, and Z to make sure it doesn't happen again. On the student level, the school needs to have an IEP meeting to see whether there was a substantive harm to the procedural violation. So you have the procedural violation, how did that impact the child? What was the substantive harm, and how can we put the child back to where the child needs to be? So for example, I had one several years ago, they kept suspending my child. They never did the manifestation, and this was a first grader, and they just kept suspending him. So, okay, clearly there was a procedural violation. The state came and said it. So now we have to have the meeting to determine what the substantive harm was. Well, he fell behind in class. So what's our remedy going to be? Our remedy for that is going to be providing tutoring. It was actually, that one was pretty funny because the child had been in PG County and my client moved him to DC. So my client was like, yeah, that's nice. Thank you very much. He's in DC and doing much better now. So didn't take it, but she had that available. And it didn't matter that she had moved to DC when the other school system offered the compensatory education. As long as your child was in that school system and they were liable for it and required to provide the FAPE, it doesn't matter that you moved on later. They still need to provide the remedy, the compensatory education. So she could have totally done the tutoring after the fact. Next, mediation. Mediation is you and the school system go, there's a mediator. They used to use administrative law judges, but Maryland's now been using attorneys. The attorney is not giving anybody legal advice, is not making any decisions. They usually start in the whole room, and they start with the parents or whoever filed the complaint, usually the parents. Where are you? What are you looking for? Then they go to the school. Where are you? What are you looking for? And then you have that discussion of what's going on, why you think your position is right, and so forth. Then usually you go into a caucus, and the mediator will jump between the two to see if they can find a happy ground. I've been to mediations before that was like literally, we said what we wanted and the school said, yeah, we're going to give it to you. Okay, thank you. Let's do the agreement and move on. I've been to them that we've found something halfway, like met in the middle, and it worked for my clients and it worked for them. And I've had times that they were dead set, not going to happen. So we're moving on to due process, or my clients have decided, you know what, I don't even want to fight it anymore. I'm going to go do my own thing. Pull my child, do homeschool, do private school, whatever it is. And then you have the due process. Now, here's the thing with due process. It is a legal proceeding. Yes, as a parent, can you represent yourself? You can, but again, it's a legal proceeding. Can an advocate represent you? Not in Maryland. Other states they do, but not in Maryland, which is a good thing because while I love advocates and they have their place, they don't have the legal background. And there's decisions that you make in the due process hearing that are strategies that impact things in the future, that if you don't have the legal knowledge, you don't know. And you don't know that doing this now is going to harm you later. So there was a case one time, and I don't remember the name, but an advocate had represented the parents in a due process hearing. They did not go their way. They then hired the attorney to file the next level with district court. And the district court said, well, the advocate chose not to do XYZ. That was a strategy the advocate chose to do. We can't go back and fix that because we can only look at the record. There's nothing we can do. The hearing officer's determination stands. So not knowing, the advocate kind of lost the case for them, whereas an attorney might have known and done something different, and it could have gone a totally different way. And that's the thing to remember, is that a due process hearing, it's a legal proceeding. You wouldn't go to regular court by yourself to represent yourself, unless it's minor traffic, maybe. But on serious things, this is your kid's education. I know it's expensive, but it's your child's future and your child's education. And if you feel strongly enough that you need to litigate it, and there's a case there, then you really need to have your legal representation.
Francis, this is Melanie. I just want to let you know you have 5 minutes till
We are
8 o'clock.
perfect. I am so on target. Thank you. All right, when to bring support? When you just can't anymore. As parents, we've all been there, right? I just can't. I can't anymore. And trust me, I've had education attorneys that have brought for their own children, have brought their own attorneys because they just couldn't anymore. That's why you need to bring support. Now, is it that you're just looking at the goals and the accommodations and you need to make sure that the IEP is appropriate? Then an advocate is probably appropriate. Are you already at the point that you're disagreeing and you're looking at placement? That's when you probably need to consider an attorney. Again, the school clearly isn't listening. You go in, talk, and the school's like, oh yeah, okay. And then they just do whatever they want to do. So again, the school's not listening. What is it that you want the school to listen to? Sometimes an advocate can help here, but when the school's not listening, usually you need an attorney. And here's what bringing an attorney in MCPS does, is that brings their attorney and it brings somebody from central office. And it's a very different meeting when you have attorney eyes and central office looking at the school. Because the central office is going to say, oh, well, wait, we don't do it that way. We do it this way. Might educate them. Or the school is going to be like, oh, whoops, we can't say that. We're not going to say that anymore. We're going to agree. When your child's not progressing, if you don't see, your child is learning the ABCs and knows A to C, and the next semester knows A to D or A to F, they're not making significant progress. Or more importantly, like they're not, they're getting Ds. They're getting Ds in general education. Something's not happening. Something's not right. There needs adjustments on the IEP. And what does that look like? So sometimes you could have an advocate go and look at it and be like, oh, look, if they do this, this, and this, that would be helpful. And that could work. Or sometimes you need to bring the attorney to be like, hey, this kid's not progressing. We need to go to another placement. This isn't working. We need to look at something else. And that's where it goes to the change of placement. When you want to change a placement and the school's not agreeing with you, whether it's them trying to go somewhere and you want to stay, or them trying to keep you and you want your child to go somewhere, that's a change of placement where you really need to have support with you and usually an attorney. So, as I said, look, I'm 3 minutes early, a little bit. So here are some things. This Scan Me one is free downloadables. On my website, it will be updated. I have my old presentation that I did back in November. This one was upgraded, so I will have it soon, but I also have procedural safeguards on one page. I have appropriateness of extended school year, acronyms, and what to look for in an IEP. So those are some free downloadables if you scan that. And then the other one, Learn More, that has all of my information about Shefter Law, and it also has all of my social medias on that so that you can follow me. I have a show every Tuesday at 12 o'clock that goes live on YouTube and Facebook. I think we have like 80 episodes already that are on my YouTube channel and my page. I also have 3-minute videos that I try to do weekly, and a blog post that's published weekly. So
Yeah.
next.
Thanks, Francis.
Yeah.
I've seen your website and it's so full of so many recordings and resources. We can also put links to all of that in the YouTube recording in the detail, as well as on our web page for past events. So I just want to turn to Q&A now. There's so many questions in the chat, as well as questions that were submitted. So I know that, Francis, you have looked at some of those, but our board president, Sue Keisler, also will be moderating questions to help you out as well.
Okay, so I'm going to run through the pre-submitted ones as quickly as possible. So how to assess if services are being delivered. If it's related services, you ask for your service trackers. It's a little hard on the other way. You got to ask them for the data and where's the data that you're delivering these services? Like, where is it showing that you've done this? What to do when you're not satisfied with the case manager? Unfortunately, MCPS usually won't change it. I've had them try to change central office person and they won't do it. If a psych evaluation recommends an ARS student benefits from small class sizes, is MCPS obligated to make this accommodation? Absolutely not. That's one person. An IEP team makes the determination if the child needs a class size, so that the psych eval recommendation is just one piece of data. IEP versus 504, I already recovered. 504 for anxiety and executive functioning, below grade level. Should we, yeah. I mean, if your child's below grade level, even with the small group intervention, you should definitely be looking at an IEP, because you're doing resource-based instruction and your child's still not progressing. Something else is going on and you need to look at an IEP and getting them assessed, and just do it in writing to the school. What to expect when the IEP meeting is to lower the goals because the previous goals were not met or were too high. Well, you got to look at why. Why were the goals too high? Why did we ruin them? Is it something that, okay, we need to scale it back a little? Or is it your child's not progressing and they're not providing the right services and we need to look at a different placement? Concerns of how treated when family brings an advocate or attorney. I've never had a client come back and say, well, the school's treating me differently. If anything, a lot of times teachers prefer it, or I don't want to say prefer it, but teachers are like, thank you. Because a lot of times the teachers know that needs to be happening, but for whatever reason, they're being told they can't do it, or they're not allowed to do it, or it's a policy to not do it. So I haven't seen that. And it also depends on who the advocate or the attorney is. Are they going in the adversarial way, or are they going in like myself and my team members that were going in a way of, hey, we're just trying to work together. Let's put all our brains together and see what we can do for this child to make them progress. Navigating issues with AAC device when it's seen as a distraction for others. Well, that's not your problem. Your child needs your AAC device. We need to figure out, what do you need to do to teach the class so that it's not a distraction anymore. Your child shouldn't not be able to communicate because other kids are like, ooh, what's that? Let's teach the kids what that is, so it's not a distraction as much anymore. School-based staff supposed to be following OG framework? No, you can't tell them what to use. You can get the language put into an IEP, usually in supplementary aid, but we can't require a school system to use a specific type of framework. Does public school allow ABA therapists in the classrooms? They do not. MCPS definitely does not. The thought process is that it's the school system's responsibility to provide FAPE. And if they're allowing somebody else to come in to be doing it, then they're not fulfilling their obligation. So it's silly, I know, but it's the way they are in their thought process. So those are all the pre-submitted questions. So I'm going to turn over to Sue to
Okay,
lead
great.
the rest.
Okay, terrific. Thank you so much. That was a very efficient answering of all those
Sit
questions.
through.
So now we can turn to the questions that were in the chat. Okay, so first question, and there are actually a couple questions along these same lines. For the students who okay, so this one person said, truly twice exceptional students, how do you avoid an IEP or 504 from dumbing down the academic program, such as possibly pushing a resource class when they don't want it? And another person asked also about taking a resource class instead of an elective. And so I think that some families are feeling like their child is being pushed into doing resource classes at the expense of an elective they might be very interested in taking.
And that's always a challenge, especially when our kids get older. So IDEA doesn't address our 2E kids. They just address where the deficiencies are. Or I hate saying deficiencies, but you know what I mean? Like what are the supports needed where our child needs an IEP? They should not be dumbing down the program at all. They should be teaching what your child needs. If your child is not going to be successful in a resource room, then your child should not be in a resource room. Just because your child has autism or ADHD or whatever it is and 2E does not mean they have to have a resource room. Resource room is usually to teach the social skills and executive functioning skills. If your child's needs can be met a different way, then that's what needs to happen. Because if we force our kids to go into a resource room instead of taking gym or music or art or whatever that elective is that they want to take, we're going to lose that child. And it's not going to be, they're not going to be successful in the resource room anyway, because they're going to resent having to be there. So with our 2E kids, it's finding that spot where they're stimulated intellectually is the challenge of still getting that support they need. But again, it's looking at your child's individual profile and what does your child need to be able to be successful in those more rigorous settings.
Okay, makes a lot of sense. Okay, here's another one. Can you speak about extra time when it comes to homework and assignments, particularly within an academically advanced program? There are only 24 hours in a day, so many class hours. How is it that extra time for turning in homework is sustainable when it's implemented?
Oh, great. It's not. It's not. And that's where it comes in to get reduced homework and reduced workload. Usually we have it worked in as that only do what's required to show mastery of a topic. If they're required to write a 5-page paper, maybe your child only needs to write a 3-page paper. Because yeah, like, okay, so now I have an extra week, but then I have all of that week's assignments piled up and it's just stressing me out even worse, right? And no, I don't want to spend my winter break to catch up on everything because I have that extra time. So it's really looking at reduced workload and reduced homework.
Yeah, okay. Here's a question. It's kind of broad. How does one ensure implementation or enforcement of an IEP?
So that's the $1,000,000 question. You can't really, you know what I mean? Like, that's the thing, is that we can have a perfect, well, there's no such thing as perfect IEP, but the best IEP we can have in place, but we can't force anybody to do their jobs, right? We can't make them do what they're supposed to do. And so that's where we come into, well, what is it that we want for our child? Are they making progress? Are they not making progress? If they're not making progress, then let's look at what supports we can put in place. And again, that comes down to, what is your ultimate desire? Do you want your child to stay in the home-based model, or do you want your child to go to a non-public or somewhere in between? And that's finding that and then adjusting the IEP to make it more easily implemented, if that makes sense.
Okay. All right. And then there are a couple of questions about being denied an IEP. Some people are denied an IEP, but they have 504, but the 504 is not supporting their needs. Others want advice about how to get that first IEP if it's been denied. And they're going into a meeting for reassessment to try once again to get an IEP. If you have any advice.
So, yeah, I mean, those goes back to your buzzwords of not available for learning, and also having your own data. If they have outside providers that can do a report or put any input. But it's being able to look at the reports of whatever evaluations they've done and pulling from there of what the supports are that your child needs and where the objectives are, the goals and objectives are. So that goes back to the being able to say, hey, my child has executive functioning. That's what all of the 504 accommodations are, and it's not working. So now I need my child to be taught how to break down their assignments, how to use their agenda book. And that's the goals. And so that's where I've been successful, is the not available for learning. And these are the goals that my child needs to work on to be successful in the classroom.
Okay. So those are the phrases to come back to.
Buzzwords.
Okay. Buzzwords. Okay. One person wants to know, what do you think of flash passes where the student is able to go somewhere for some reason without permission?
Flash passes are great. They're needed because our kids need to be able to self-regulate. What schools are like, oh, but they can't always do that, and they can't always walk away. But if our child is in a classroom setting and they know they need a break, then they need to go on that break, because they're not going to be available for learning if they're forced to sit in that classroom. If your child's not a child that's going to abuse it, then you need to have that conversation. If it seems like your child is using it to avoid everything, then you have to have that conversation with the IEP team of like, well, how can we adjust this so that they don't have the free access to the Flash Pass, but has the access when it's truly needed. And that might be that there's a check-in from the teacher twice a day of like, hey, are you good or do you need a break? Rather than having a Flash Pass. But it's, again, looking at your individual child, the individual child's needs, their responsibility level, and what it will look like. Oh, and one thing on the Flash Pass is I always say that you need to have their self-identified safe person. So the Flash Pass isn't just to get out of the classroom, it's to go to their self-identified place safe person, and the school and the student should find 3 so that there are options if your child needs to go to their safe person.
Okay. I know you talked about BCBAs before. Here's one more question about that. Our district doesn't recognize the certification of BCBAs and doesn't allow outside providers meaningful access to observe clients during the school day. Our school system studiously avoids soft skills and functional performance data. Through what avenues might we push our district to let our credentialed providers in and or hire BCBAs to support students, staff, and families?
They're not going to let the providers in because, again, that goes back to liability and that they need to provide the FAPE, but they should be allowing observations and being able to talk.
Yeah.
It goes to your child's need. You can't, for the school system, the law doesn't allow you to say, well, it has to be a BCBA, or it has to be this, or it has to be, an OG trained person. But based on the needs, they need to have a behaviorist that can help with the plan. And so that's where you get it in that sense, is that your child needs more on a behavior intervention plan, or whatever it is. And then that's what you need built into the IEP, that they need to provide that additional adult support that's trained on how to interact with your child and handle the behavior plan. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So once again, it's sort of, you can't dictate the specific way that this need is going to be met. Right?
Correct.
Okay. And then along the same lines, this is probably the same answer for this question, which is, if a trampoline is needed, is it the responsibility of the parent to purchase it?
Nope.
And I assume.
No, it's the school's responsibility. If it's determined as an IEP team that this is what's needed for your child to regulate, the school's responsible for supplying it. And that being said, I've always said to my school, like, look, if you need me to do it, I'll do it, type situation. But no, the school, if it's something that's needed on the IEP, they're getting federal funding for that, and they are getting state funding for that, and that's their responsibility to provide it. Same with the noise canceling headphones. Now, noise canceling headphones, it's those big, ugly yellow ones. If your child doesn't want those and they want the little ones, the school's doing what they need to do of providing something. But for a trampoline, something like that, the school needs to be providing it. And if the school's not providing it, call up to central office.
Okay. But with a specific thing like that, the school might well say, well, we don't think they need that specific thing. What they need is something that's sensory, and they might provide something alternative, right?
Right. That is true. I mean, but you need to get them to agree on what it is. Like, like on the top of my head, I'm like trying to think of, if jumping is what your child needs, what other thing could there be other than a trampoline, like that would be appropriate. And so I can't think of much. So, but if the school came up with something amazingly creative that you think would work, then that's fine.
Okay. Okay. So this one is about objective data versus subjective data and how the school reacts to this. It says, what do I do if the school says my child is on grade level, even though he has 3 exceptional qualities and 2 disabilities? The standardized assessments don't reflect what the classroom teachers report. And I asked for clarification that the school maintains he's on grade level, but those standardized tests show him to be 2 years behind. So is objective data preferable to subjective data?
It's a combination. There needs to be several, like the law is written that it needs to be several data points. So, having the standardized test and what the teacher says are 2 data points. Well, what other data points? Okay, well, let's have, somebody do the the WJ to get the levels of achievement. Let's get another data point. So it's not like one preferred over the other, it's the combination of all of them together.
Okay, makes sense. Okay, here's a very specific question from one parent. We had an IEP periodic review meeting scheduled for early January to review a BIP for our 15-year-old son. The school has rescheduled the meeting to February 14th, and they want it to be an annual review meeting. Is this too early to do an annual review since we won't have fourth period marking data? And so they're asking sort of, does that make sense to switch it to an annual review so early in the year?
I mean, it depends on what, so annual reviews are not based on the school year, it's based on when the last IEP was done. So February 14th is probably fine for an annual. 15-year-old child is, am I right or wrong, on 8th grade? If it's a transition to high school, then I would probably push it to say, no, we want it closer to so that it can be the transition meeting as well. Because high school is going to look very different. But I mean, annual reviews, they can do at any point in time. If your annual review is due in March or April, then I would 100% do the February as an annual review versus amending it and then doing another IEP meeting 2 months later. Make sure there's enough time to do the FBA and they have the full data that you can do the FBA and the annual review. Chances are when you're doing an FBA, if you're determined to do a behavior intervention plan, you're going to have to adjust the IEP anyway. So it might as well be as the annual review rather than amending.
Okay, makes total sense. Okay, there's several parents who've written in questions about a lack of data being shared, lack of communication from the school team. So one says, what do you do if they won't share data? They don't share data, the school team doesn't share data. Another is what to do about teacher check-ins when the counselor and the teacher ignore the parents' emails. So when they're just getting nothing from the school in the way of data, they aren't responding to your emails, what can you do?
I hear my father's voice in the background, go higher up. You know, as my father always said, you know, they don't do it on that level, go to the next level and keep going up the ladder. So, you know, pull in the principle of like, hey, this is what's going on and I'm not getting a response. This is what I need and why I need it. Always put everything in writing. Even if you have a phone conversation, at the end of the phone conversation, this is to confirm what we just spoke about, da, 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 da. Pull in somebody from resolution and compliance or from central office of the instructional specialists of like, hey, we need this because we disagree and we're not getting a response. The IEP is not getting implemented. Can you help us get this going?
Okay. Let's see. Under what circumstances can we ask for tutoring support?
Tutoring, if you're meaning outside of school, then it's not. Some schools do have tutoring that they just offer to all, and that's fine. I mean, that goes to the extended school year, which is a whole nother presentation I could do on the appropriateness of extended school year. Like, what's the reason for the tutoring? Is it to catch your child up? Then it's not necessarily the school's responsibility. That's something we do. If the child is progressing and at least progressing, but trust me, I know it kills me because if my child's behind, how are they going to catch up and stay, you know, and get there if they don't have something outside? Because there's only so many hours in the day. But if your child needs that extra specific tutoring, then you can ask for more pull-out services. But again, that's where you go and you have to take that balance of, is pulling your child out of whatever classes it is to get that extra help going to be successful, or do you need to private pay for tutoring? And there are a lot of places out there for tutoring that offer some free supports if finance is an issue, and things like that. Look, I personally, my child has dyslexia and dysgraphia. I'm paying for private tutoring because there's not enough hours in the school day. And if I pulled her out enough to make that progress, she's going to fall behind in everything else. So tutoring through an IEP is not usually realistic. That being said, if it's comprehensive, compensatory education, so your child didn't progress or miss services, then that's something different, that you could get compensatory education and the school system would pay for tutoring to catch your child up to where they would have been had they been getting those services.
Okay. Here's one. My child was denied OT services as I was told it is not needed for her education level. She is nonverbal and has lots of sensory needs. How to communicate this with the school system better?
So MCPS is very, very difficult to get OT services because of that reason. They say they don't need the direct services. It's not educational impact. The child is accessing the general education curriculum fine without it. So it's a very hard level to get to. When it comes to the sensory, you can still have the OT do a sensory observation, and provide input of what they can do. And a lot of times what OTs will do is they'll add supplementary aids and services to give that extra sensory. But it's not something that your child needs direct services in. So that could be consultative or just something that they put in the IEP under supplementary aids. And that's where you go, is you're asking for, hey, my child has sensory needs. We need an OT evaluation or informal evaluation. If they say no, can I please have that in a PWN? Why are you saying we don't need that observation? How are you making that determination that there's no educational impact if you don't even have an OT come in and observe?
Okay. Here's another one about switching from a 504 to an IEP. We're looking to switch our 13-year-old daughter from a 504 to an IEP. And it specifies she has ADHD, autism, gifted, audio response issue, and anxiety. They ask, is it incredibly helpful or a must to have an education advocate at your first IEP meeting to create an IEP? Or is it not essential?
It's not essential if the school's on the same page.
Mm.
And that's the thing. I will say an advocate can be very helpful in the sense that you don't know how to write an IEP, obviously. Guess what? Most teachers don't even know how to write an IEP. It takes years of education and practice, and they don't never really teach you. You just kind of learn it. So it would be helpful in the sense of, yes, making sure that the IEP has everything it needs. It depends on the school. Some schools are better than other schools. It depends on if the school is agreeing or not. I mean, to me, having an extra pair of eyes on it isn't harmful. Whether you want to bring the advocate to the IEP meeting or just have them review the draft IEP once you get the eligibility, then it could be helpful, definitely. And if you're not in the adversarial position, like this is where I say that an advocate could be perfectly fine because you're not adversarial and you want somebody that really knows IEPs. Most advocates know better than attorneys. I'm a little bit different because of my educational background, but having an advocate could be very helpful, but it's not necessary, especially if the school seems to be on the same page as you.
Okay. Here's a question. Our IEP is in February, so I think their next IEP meeting. The school wants to send the child to a different school because he can't do the routines like packing up, taking the folder out, placing the backpack in the locker. His academic skills are good. The school team and case manager want to move him out. How should we respond? And they say that they have data at home and other places where the child does show these skills.
I mean, that's where, again, you're going into the challenge. But if it's just because they can't do the routine, well, what supports can we put in place to help your child learn and do the routine? Does he need a visual schedule? Does he need gentle reminders? What is it like? Not being able to do the morning routine to me is not a reason to move a child. Something else is going on, and that's what you got to figure out. If he's progressing towards his goals, and making progress, then they have no data to support moving him. Without knowing like where he is and where they're looking to send him is a little bit challenging because without knowing the full profile. But if you disagree with them, you prove your own data of like, hey, he is doing it. He's just not doing it for you because you're not doing X, Y, and Z. okay, let's adjust the IEP to do X, Y, and Z and see what happens. But again, that's just one data point. He's not doing a routine, but if he's participating academically and gaining benefit, I'm assuming they're moving to a more restrictive environment. So least restrictive environment, like, hey, he's doing academically fine. He's making progress. This is the least restrictive environment. He's entitled to that, to make the progress. Not doing a routine isn't a reason to put him in a more restrictive environment.
Okay. Here's one. How can I get the school to stop focusing on straight A's and above grade level MAP scores and focus on the need for stimming time, social thinking, pragmatic and speech fluency? And they have an add-on question, which is there a way to request one-on-one counseling for social thinking because it's affecting their ability to make friends?
Yeah, I mean, that's the social aspects. And again, it's the not available for learning, or if your child is not fitting in and not interacting socially, they're not getting everything. Why is your child getting the straight A's? Is your child getting the straight A's because your child's coming home and working for 3 hours by themselves on learning the stuff and doing it? Do you have a private tutor? What's going on? But that's the argument of my child's not fully accessing the general education curriculum to the ability that they can and need these extra supports. And the counseling 100%, that's where the behavior, the social stories and social skills and pragmatic skills pull in the speech and language pathologist. So it can be two ways. It could be either through the SLP or the special education teacher or even the counselor. But again, those are the arguments of my child's not progressing. I need, we need these goals to be worked on, and you need to just make that nexus of why those skills are needed for the child to fully access the curriculum. And one of those, a lot of times that you can use is that doing group projects. Is that your child's not able to do group projects. So that's something that you can be, that's where the academic concern is that there's always group projects and my child's not able to do that because of the social skills. And so that's sometimes how you can get in there as well.
Yeah, that sounds like a good hook. All right. I think this may be our last question as we're coming on the end of our time. Okay, so can you speak about how the upcoming Department of Education and the new administration might impact local IEP discussions?
Really good question. I have no idea. Here's the reality of it. We're all a little nervous about what he's going to do and what's going to happen, no matter which side of the, coin you're on. Until he does something, we don't know. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, he's saying he's going to disband the Department of Education. Well, reality check, that's not going to happen. Although, but until it happens, we're not going to know what the impact is. I will say, being in the state of Maryland and the county of Montgomery County, I think we're pretty safe no matter what they do because of Maryland's thought on special education and Montgomery County's thought. But until we know exactly what's going to happen, predicting what the outcome's going to be is really is a challenge.
Okay. All right, that's helpful. Okay, I think that's all we have time for. That was super helpful. You got through a ton of questions, so that's great. Melanie?
Yeah, so thank you, Frances. That will have to be it. I just want to let everyone know that Daniel is putting in the chat a link for feedback. We have a very short 2-question feedback form, and we invite you to share what you thought of tonight's discussion, as well as give us your ideas on future topics for this this event, for this monthly series. So also go to our website and go to our events calendar to learn more about upcoming events as well as community events. And then I do want to just add very quickly, if you enjoyed tonight's presentation and you want to see more, please go to xminds.org/donate to make a contribution. Big or small, your support keeps all of our services free and accessible to the entire autism community. Thank you again, Francis, and to all of you who joined us tonight. Have a good night.